Hi guys. Today I'm going to be talking about the Kalinago, Carib people of the West Indies. This cultural exploration project was one that I did on the Kalinago, Carib people of Dominica. Well, it was of the West Indies, but preferentially Dominica. And I'm going to be talking to you, I'm going to give you a little summary of the history and the culture of the people, interview experience, and my personal thoughts and feelings while I was studying this culture. Carib, Island Carib, or Kalinago people, after whom the Caribbean was named, are a group of people who live in Venezuela and the Lesser Antilles Islands. They are an Amerindian people whose origin lies in the northern coast of South America. These people spoke either a Carib language or a Pidgin, but the Caribs' regular raids on other groups resulted in so many female Arawak captives that it was not uncommon for the women to speak Calififona, a Maipurian language, which is Arawakan. In the Southern Caribbean, they coexisted with a related Caribbean-speaking group, the Galibi. They lived in separate villages in Venezuela, Grenada, Tobago, St. Lucia, Dominica, and St. Vincent. The Caribs are believed to have migrated from the Orinoco River area in South America to settle in the Caribbean islands about 1200 AD, according to carbon dating. Over the 2 centuries leading up to Columbus's arrival in the Caribbean archipelago in 1492, the Caribs mostly displaced the Maipurian-speaking Tainos by warfare, extermination, and assimilation. The Taino had settled the island chains early in history, migrating from the mainland. The Caribs produced the silver products which Ponce de Leon found in Taino communities. None of the insular Amerindians mined for gold but obtained it by trade from the mainland. The Caribs were skilled boat builders and sailors. They appeared to have owed their dominance in the Caribbean basin to their mastery of warfare. The Caribs were displaced by the Europeans with a great loss of life. Most fatalities resulted from Eurasian infectious diseases such as smallpox, to which they had no natural immunity, as well as warfare. Others were assimilated during the colonial period, and a few retained areas, such as in Dominica. Small populations survive, and then now we have the Carib territory, which is in northeastern Dominica. The Black Caribs, later known as Garifuna of St. Vincent and Dominica, were descended from a group of enslaved Africans who were marooned from shipwrecks of slave ships, as well as slaves who escaped there. They intermarried with the Caribs and formed the last native culture to resist the British. The descendants continue to live there today and are known as the Garifuna ethnic group. Carib resistance delayed the settlement of Dominica by Europeans. The Black Carib communities that remained in St. Vincent and Dominica retained a degree of autonomy well into the 19th century. So right now we're going to talk about the music of the Carib people. Garifuna music from the Garifuna people, which were descendants of the Carib, Arawak, and West African people, is quite different from the rest of the music created in Central America. The most famous form is punta. Its associated musical style has the dancers move their hips in a circular motion, basically similar to that Hawaiian dance that we usually see. It is an evolved form of traditional music, still usually played using traditional instruments, and punta has seen some modernization and electrification in the 1970s, which they call punta rock. So, we have pop music, pop rock music, and they have punta rock. Traditional punta dancing is consciously competitive. Artists like Pen Cayetana helped innovate modern punta rock by adding guitars to the traditional music, and he paved the way for later artists like Andy Palacio and Children of the Most High and Black Coral. Other forms of Garifuna music and dance include hungu hungu, combination, waranagua, Abay Mahani, Mata Muerte, Larimuna, What a Gunman, Gunjai Sambai, Shari Kanari, Eramuna Egi, Paranda, Berusu, Pontarak, Taramuna Ligilisi, Arumahani, and Amalihani. Punta is the most popular dance in Garifuna culture. It is performed around holidays and at parties and other social events. Punta lyrics are usually composed by the women. Chamba and Hunga Hungo are a circular dance in a 3-beat rhythm, which is often combined with punta. In the Garifuna culture, there's another dance called Dugu. I've always heard my grandmother speak about this Dugu dance, and I spoke to her some days ago talking about my project, and she brought up this Dugu dance again, so I made sure I included it. This dance is a ritual done for a death in the family to pay their respect to their loved ones. In 2001, Garifuna music was proclaimed one of the masterpieces of the oral and intangible heritage of humanity by UNESCO, which is the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. Caribs are believed to have been polytheists. As the Spanish began to colonize the Caribbean area, they wanted to convert the natives to Catholicism. The Kalinago religion practiced by the Carib had elements similar to the ancestor worship of the Taino. They believed in an evil spirit called Maibuya, who had to be placated for an individual to avoid harm. The chief function of their shamans, called buis, was to heal the sick with herbs and to cast spells which would keep Maibuya at bay. The buis were very important and underwent special training instead of becoming warriors. As they were held to be the only people who could avert evil, they were treated with great respect. Their ceremonies were accompanied with sacrifices. As with the Arawaks and other Native Americans, the Caribs smoked tobacco in the rituals of their religion. Early Carib culture was patriarchal. Women carried out important domestic duties of rearing young children, processing and producing food and clothing, and cultivating the land for farming, including sowing and harvesting. In the 17th century, Europeans reported that the women, with their children, lived in separate houses from men, a custom recorded among other South American tribes. And this was confirmed by one of my interviewees. She was telling me how the women do sleep in a different room from the men. It's a cultural thing. It's nothing to do with, okay, well, I don't love you. Because, in our culture, you sleep with your husband. You sleep with your spouse. The only time there's an issue like that is if you're separated, you guys had a bad argument, or something like that. The women were highly revered and held substantial socio-political power. Island Carib society was reputedly more socially egalitarian than Taino society. Although there were village chiefs and war leaders, there were no large states or multi-tiered aristocracy. The local self-government unit may have been the longhouse dwellings populated by men or women, typically run by one or more chieftains reporting to an island council. The summary that I just presented to you was all bits and pieces of important information that my interviewees presented to me and was rightfully confirmed through research. They gave me some vital information about their culture that showed me how unique their culture is and how different their culture was from everybody else's. As I stated in my introduction, my drive for studying this culture was the fact that my paternal grandmother is a Carib who grew up in the Carib Reserve of Eastern Dominica. I barely knew her, and being given this ethnographic project gave me an opportunity to understand this little piece of me that makes me a unique human being. The interviewing process of my cultural exploration was one that went smoothly. The people were very open and inviting, and I felt as if they were so happy to see that there is someone interested in learning about their culture. The first person I interviewed was my grandmother, who I spoke to and last saw when I was maybe 14, 15. And I got in contact with her, and when she heard who it was, she was so excited. I explained to her that I need to, find out some things about the Carib culture because it's a part of me. And I explained to her, I'm doing a cultural exploration project for my intercultural communication class. And before I could even ask a question, she started with historical information. She went to talk about stories from when she was growing up and so on. She explained to me that the native language began to die out when they started allowing integration with the fellow Dominicans who were not Caribs. She said that now the current generation Caribs speak the second language of the people, which is Patois, broken French and Spanish. As I listened to her speak about the food, I started to reflect on the types of food that my dad cooks, and all the pieces started coming together. I felt like I was getting familiar with a part of me that hasn't been portrayed outwardly. She even was telling me about the differences in the physical features of the Caribs and Arawaks. She told me so much other things that made me see how unique and rich their culture is. We conversed for about two to 2.5 hours. I interviewed some other people as well, but these were current generation Caribs who could have only told me about what they heard from their parents or heard from their grandparents. And majority of the little pieces of information was basically about the food they eat, physical features, religion, etc. The interviews that I conducted were done in Birmingham. Apparently there's a Caribbean association down there, and majority of the members are of Carib Kalinago descent. Doing this cultural exploration project really made me smile. I grew up in the United States Virgin Islands, and majority of my way of life has been influenced from America. But we still hold on to some of the culture that was first brought into our country. For instance, we have our own dialect and lingo when we speak. We have our own festivities, which you guys know is Carnival. And we still have our own cultural food. We are under America, but we refuse to give up our rich culture. In doing this cultural exploration, I realized the same thing within this culture. As my grandmother said, they adapted to certain aspects of the lifestyle of the other Dominicans, but their cultural habits still remain. This cultural exploration made me realize that you cannot take away the identity and uniqueness of an individual or a group of people. Each person that you see has a rich history of bratopsy. And bratopsy is a word that we use at home, which is part of my dialect and part of my lingo. I hope you guys learned a good amount of information about the Carib Kalinago people of Dominica. I am still continuing to learn because there's only so much you can learn about a culture in such little time. But I will continue to further my research and continue to interview those who have this cultural background, because I really want to know more about this culture. I really want to know more about the indigenous people of the Caribbean islands. Thank you.